Can Theresa May deliver Brexit? Britain's Prime Minister is fighting to save her job and convince the nation to back her divorce deal with the EU. And what if there is no deal? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Richelle Carey. Britain's exit from the European Union has finally been agreed to, but Brexit is far from a done deal. The United Kingdom is anything but. The country is deeply divided. EU leaders are due to sign the draft document in Brussels next week. But first, MPs in London must approve, and Prime Minister Theresa May is under attack from her party, from Parliament, from the public, all criticizing her for failing to negotiate better divorce terms to go it alone. She says it's the only deal that will work, but failing to bow to demands to renegotiate risks losing her job. Conservative Party MPs are gathering support, hoping to trigger a vote of no confidence in her leadership. The leader of the House of Commons has told the Prime Minister her draft deal needs improving.
What I'm doing is working very hard to support the Prime Minister in getting the Brexit deal that 17.4 million people voted for. And I think there's still the potential to improve on the clarification and on some of the measures within it, and that's what I'm hoping to be able to help with.
The French finance minister says some British MPs have lied to British people and the dream of leaving the EU is a nightmare.
We can do it, obviously. Each country is free to decide to leave the single market, to leave the European Union. But what Brexit shows is that the economic costs of leaving the single market is quite simply exorbitant, and that there are certainly lying and irresponsible politicians in Great Britain who explained to the British people that Brexit would end up in a bright future. The truth is that Brexit will end in a nightmare.
The Austrian Chancellor says the deal is good for everyone.
It's a good deal for both sides. Nobody was tricked into it, but this deal prevents a hard Brexit. It helps us in Europe, but it helps Britain even more. A hard Brexit would hurt Great Britain much more. I sincerely hope that there will be some necessary support in the British Parliament.
Let's introduce the panel now. In Stockholm by Skype, James Savage, CEO of the local Europe. He also writes on how Brexit affects British people in the EU. In Durham, Tom Brooks, he is the author of Becoming British and Dean and Professor of Law and Government at Durham Law School. And finally, in St. Andrews, also by Skype, Drew Lickerman, a Scottish for Leave campaigner. Welcome to all of you. Drew, I want to start with you. Is the deal as bad as the critics say?
Yeah, I really do think it's as bad as the critics say. And I hate to say it's even a Brexit deal because it's really not Brexit. It's really only Brexit in name only. It doesn't allow the United Kingdom to become an international player like Brexit was supposed to strike their own trade deals and go off on their own. And at the same time, it also and take back control of their laws. But at the same time, it also could very well lead to the splitting up and the breaking up of the United Kingdom, especially in relation to Northern Ireland.
Okay, we'll come back to that point, obviously. Tom, I want your thoughts. Is this deal as bad as everybody says?
I agree that it is as bad as people say. About 2 years ago, I came out and said that when the Prime Minister was saying Brexit means Brexit, but wasn't much substance behind it, I thought that there wouldn't be any genuine Brexit at all, at least not in the plans that we would see. And part of me is pleased to see that that's come true. Another part of me is very disappointed to see what's before us. And I want to explain in a second why it's so bad. I think on the Remain side, those who wanted to stay in the European Union, of course, they will not like any deal to leave the European Union. But the moment Britain has a voice at the top table while being subjected to EU rules, the plan would have us subjected to the rules but without a say at the table. On the Leave side, so many are upset about this. I think because there are many different voices calling for many different things, not all of which can be accommodated. And the Prime Minister had an impossible task of trying to please everyone, and she's shown that she's not been able to please anyone, it would seem.
Yeah, it does. James, do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on this intensely negative response this draft deal has gotten?
I mean, this was inevitable from the very beginning. It was always clear that if Britain were to leave the EU's orbit totally, it would be an economic disaster, at least in the short term, and politically very difficult. So that was always going to be something that she was not going to be able to deliver. Yet, of course, by doing what she's doing now, which is trying to honour the result of the referendum and sort of half leave the EU, she leaves behind many of the benefits. She keeps Britain tied to the EU in many respects, but without a say. So, you know, as the others have said, this doesn't please Leavers and this doesn't please Remainers. I suppose her strategy really has been to disappoint both sides equally and make them sufficiently afraid of the alternatives, that is, crashing out without a deal for the Remainers and staying in the EU for the Leavers, to push this through Parliament. But it's looking very hard for her.
James, we played a little bit of some comments from the French finance minister a few minutes ago, basically saying that the British people were lied to. They were sold a bill of goods. I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of people have said that. Do you agree with that?
I think it is quite clear that there were quite a lot of lies told by the Leave campaign. The idea that the membership of the European Union was costing British taxpayers £350 million a week, and that money would be able to go to the NHS. That was the obvious lie. It was a pretty ill-informed campaign. And now we're seeing that there's been quite significant evidence put forward now, thanks to the journalist Carol Cadwallader on The Guardian, who's uncovered significant evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the Leave campaign, and particularly the Leave.eu unofficial Leave campaign that was very prominent during the referendum campaign. So yeah, I think, you know, we have seen lies. We've seen lies told on both sides, as is always the case in politics. But the lies on the Leave side seem to be particularly egregious, and I think we're seeing the comments from the French government have been echoed by governments around Europe who've been appalled by what they've seen happening in the UK.
Drew, as someone who is pro-Brexit, I want your thoughts on that. Do you think that people were told that something could happen that just can't happen?
Absolutely not. I think the reason why we're not seeing a Brexit like all these campaigners promised is because we have to remember, none of these people that campaigned for Brexit supported Brexit. None of them have had a big say in the government. None of them have been negotiating the deal. This Brexit deal has been negotiated by people who supported remaining in the European Union. It's all the people who all the government leaders who are civil servants who have been in charge of negotiating and selling this deal to the public. They're all people that didn't believe in Brexit. They're not people who made the arguments in supporting Brexit that we're going to take back control of laws. We're going to take back control of our own trade deals, strike our own trade deals, and be our own global power. I think the reason why we haven't seen a lot of follow-throughs on what Brexiteers supported is because Brexiteers have been, people who support Brexit have been completely shut out of the negotiation process. It's been conducted completely by people that supported remaining in the European Union. And that's why I don't think we're seeing a Brexit that the majority of people voted for.
I could tell by the facial expressions from both James and Tom that you all both want to get in on that. So Tom, I'll let you go first.
Well, I would respectfully disagree entirely with that. Within hours of the referendum result, Nigel Farage, a very prominent campaigner for leaving, dropped out of politics. He quit altogether. It wasn't going to have anything to do with actually delivering the Brexit he'd been campaigning for about a quarter of a century. Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, Boris drops out, doesn't even try to become leader of the Tory party when then Prime Minister David Cameron stepped down, basically removing himself from having anything to do substantively with Brexit as the leader. Michael Gove quickly removed from the leadership contest himself. Everyone prominent who wanted Brexit to happen during the campaign ran like scared little children when it came time to actually putting something together. And that said, Theresa May, I thought, played a blinder in choosing David Davis to be her Brexit secretary, who was the politically in charge for the government in seeing through Brexit, and then having Boris Johnson appointed foreign secretary. Of course, both ran away as soon as a deal was to be agreed by the cabinet, citing lots of things they don't like, but never once being able to provide any plausible alternative to this. So there have been senior Brexiteers who've been at the top table. Michael Gove is a member of the government. Michael Gove was the co-chair of the official Vote Leave campaign. So it's not like the Brexiteers had nothing to do with it and were away. A lot of them ran away. A lot of them chose not to be part of this. And I think that there is a lot of responsibility on them for failing to deliver on the promises that they made. In terms of lying, I think that there was mistruths on both sides, and I think that there's a wider issue around campaign finance rules that were violated and the need for some further criminal investigation there. But I think that that main point about, well, you know, the deal isn't so good and we'll go blame a civil servant, it falls flat on its face.
James, what about that? Where are the people that feel very strongly about Brexit? Why did some of them back away from the table, from these leadership roles?
I think there are various reasons. I mean, one reason was that they weren't going to win. I think it became very clear that Boris Johnson wasn't going to get the confidence of fellow MPs to become leader of the party. But I also think, I think beyond the issue of personalities, I think what's become very clear during the Brexit negotiations is that while many of the Brexiteers have had very strong ideas about what they don't want, they haven't been very clear about how to resolve certain very key problems in the Brexit negotiations, one of which is how to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which everyone says they want to avoid. But that requires some compromises, and that's why Theresa May is trying to keep the whole of the UK within the customs union post-Brexit, because that will help avoid that hard border. So, you know, I think, you know, there were Brexiteers who were in those positions where they were able to make a difference to these negotiations. David Davis was officially the chief Brexit negotiator. He was sidelined in recent months, but from the very beginning he was the chief negotiator. But the problem was not really the personalities. The problem was the fundamental contradictions of Brexit that they haven't got an answer to.
Drew, Theresa May has said, and some of her supporters have said, if you hate what I'm doing so much, then where are the better ideas? Does she have a point?
I don't really think so at all. I think that, I mean, as it stands right now, I think it's a better idea to leave without a deal than the deal that's on the table. I strongly contend that no deal is always better than a bad deal. This current deal right now would tie the UK tie them still into the customs union, where the UK wouldn't be able to strike their own trade deals. It would put Northern Ireland essentially under Dublin-Brussels rule. So I think a better idea than this deal right now is, frankly, leaving without a deal. I think that, and I think the point about Brexiteers running away from the negotiation table, running away from responsibility, I don't think that's fully accurate either. They left the table and they left these posts because they were shut out. They were either not given the opportunity in leadership contests, or if they were put in senior government positions such as Brexit secretary, they were sidelined on the negotiations. Their job was sell this to the British public. It wasn't to actually negotiate the deal. So they were leaving the government out of protest to show that they weren't having any part of this, to show that they were being shut out of the deal.
Tom, I think you have an issue with that.
Well, I think, you know, you have David Davis, Brexit Secretary, Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary, and then Liam Fox overseeing trade. You know, people were senior members, secretaries joining the government in the cabinet. I mean, they were not junior. If they weren't doing anything for a couple years and they were wasting taxpayer money knowingly, surely they had some kind of hand in this. You know, certainly Boris Johnson as Foreign Secretary had a hand in delivering the kind of Brexit. And it's just simply true that people ran away from the leadership contest as soon as they could. Nigel Farage was nowhere to be seen. Boris Johnson, maybe he didn't have the votes from various people, but didn't even try to get the votes. He had people who wanted to make him Tory leader. He didn't even try. He had a press announcement that he wasn't going to even take part. So I think that, you know, they really haven't shown leadership. They saw how difficult it would be to deliver on their promises, and they chose it was better to snipe at the sidelines than do something substantive. I'll make a point very quickly on no deal. I think no deal is a very significant problem for its reality, and that is we do not have in the United Kingdom any infrastructure, no system, no people in place to organize custom checks and other types of things that would have to happen within months. There's been no one hired. There is no new agency. There is nothing in place to make any of this happen. And so to kind of leave without a deal because, well, we don't want to be tied into certain things we don't like, I think is particularly irresponsible, given that the enormous challenges, the enormous shutdown that would happen to Britain. Not least, no planes would be able to fly over Europe from the UK from the end of March. So it's really much worse than I think than when you look at the details. And that's been something that Davis, Johnson, Gove, and others have not wanted to talk about. The details really just makes the whole no deal scenario really unthinkable.
James, obviously the EU didn't want this divorce, right? This was the UK. The EU didn't want this to happen. So, they're not going to make the negotiations easy. The person that doesn't want the divorce usually doesn't. Having said that, is the EU driving too hard of a bargain? And if the UK ends up damaged in this, is that bad for everybody?
I don't think you could accuse the EU of driving too hard of a bargain. They've been very consistent throughout in setting out the parameters of what they want, and what they've said is that we're going to look after ourselves. If you want to leave, that's fine, but we're going to look after our own interests. We have a single market that we've worked very hard to build up over many years, and it's a rules-based single market. And if you want to be part of that single market, you're going to have to obey the rules. And the Brits have been saying, well, we want all the benefits of the single market, but we don't want to be bound by its rules or by the European Court of Justice. Now, for the Europeans, that was a red line. The Brits have had their red lines, but the Europeans have had their red lines as well. And for them, it's about protecting the system that they've got. And, they don't want Britain to benefit from leaving the EU, but that's quite a logical position for them to want to be in. They want to protect the institutions that they've built up, and they don't want a situation where it's seen as advantageous to leave the EU and you can get all the benefits but none of the drawbacks. And that would be unsustainable for them.
Drew, I want to go back to a point that Tom made a minute ago, that there's been these grand talk about all these ideas of what Brexit should and could be, but not a lot of digging down into the details of how you actually make this happen, and it's very, very soon. What of that? Where are the people that have the nuts and bolts on how to actually execute something this huge, this historic?
Right. I mean, I think the people are there. They are there, and that's why there's a leadership challenge to the Prime Minister right now. They aren't satisfied with what's going on, and they want to put another Prime Minister in power who will actually deliver a Brexit they want. I'm talking about Europe taking a tough negotiation stance. Of course, Europe's going to take a tough negotiation stance. Anyone should and could take a tough negotiation stance on something this important. But the UK is not chopped liver. The UK could take just as tough as a stance to hurt the European Union if they wanted to publicly. They could say, what's going to happen when the European Union doesn't get any of our funding? We're a net funder of the European Union. Are French farmers going to start rioting when they don't get their subsidies? Who's going to pay subsidies to Eastern European countries? It's really, I think, and what if the UK strikes a great free trade deal with the US, and the US is still trading on WTO rules with the EU? There's plenty of situations where the UK comes out of this much, much stronger than the European Union does. And knowing that, the UK has to be willing to walk away in the deal, I think. I think that's the most important thing at this point. The UK needs to get tougher on negotiations, bringing out that, the United Kingdom is pretty much necessary. We need a deal that helps both sides. Okay. A bad deal will hurt the European Union.
So, Tom, what is going to happen in the coming days? Is Theresa May going to survive this? Is this about her leadership? And where in the world is a deal going to come from?
Well, it seems clear that there's a lot of anger, if not disappointment, on her own benches. We've been hearing for most of the last week about letters of no confidence being submitted to some Graham Brady, a Durham graduate, calling for a possible vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. And we were all waiting for this day after day, and none of that's happened. Some commentators have said if the anti-Theresa May forces in her party can't organize 48 letters, they definitely won't be able to organize a better treaty. There could be something very soon, and I wouldn't rule out that her leadership is under some serious challenge. If she were to win a vote of confidence, then she would be safe for at least another year. The Tories wouldn't be able to do it again for another year. and we may well, and she'll be able to try to proceed with her plan. But win or lose the no confidence vote, I think that there's just not votes for the current plan, and that no deal seems, unless there's some other change, the more likely outcome, because she's in a minority government. Her MPs are not a majority. She relies on the DUP party in Northern Ireland to get anything through, unless she can get some extra votes from opposition parties. There's no support in any of the opposition parties for this plan. There's a significant minority of her own party is against this, and the DUP is vowed against this. So she's going to surely lose a vote on this bill, and it seems that she's going to move ahead with that. So there's then no deal. I would not rule out, if she were to succeed in staying as Prime Minister, which I think none of us have any certainty about, I think it could be likely she could lose this confidence vote.
Okay.
This deal is going to fail, and if it does, I suspect Parliament is going to go for another referendum.
Jane, wow, okay. So a two-part question then to you, James. Do you think that this draft deal will go down in flames? And do you think there really could be another referendum?
Absolutely, to both questions. I mean, if you look at the parliamentary arithmetic, it's very, very, very hard for her to get this deal through. One shouldn't rule it out. She's had some very tricky situations before in Parliament, and she's managed to pull through. But yeah, I think that it's very likely that a combination of her own arch Brexiteers and basically Remainers in the rest of the House will vote this deal down. But if that happens, it's pretty clear also that there is not a majority in the House of Commons for a no-deal situation. I think most MPs, most mainstream MPs, are afraid of no deal. And then a second referendum becomes a way out for those MPs. So I think that's a highly likely scenario. But anything could happen, but that is a highly likely scenario.
Okay, Drew, same question to you, the final question. Do you think that this will go to another referendum? Do you think that a deal will be reached?
Right. No, I don't think there'll be another referendum. The United Kingdom is not a banana republic. 2 years ago, when there was a referendum, the government sent out a leaflet that said they were going to follow through on the vote. I don't think there's redo votes, and I think it's a very, very bad precedent for democracy when you have a vote and then 2 years later decide it's time to do a redo vote. So I don't think a referendum will be happening. I don't think the majority in the Conservative or the Labour Party wants that to happen. And as of right now, I would say it's most likely there'd be no deal. Hopefully there's a deal. I think there is a deal to be made that'll benefit both sides. But if the current deal is the only option on the table right now, I think it'll be no deal and no second referendum.
So, Drew, do you think that Theresa May is the person that can get this through, or would you like it to be somebody else?
Look, I think if Theresa May, I think she will survive the vote of no confidence. That's my best guess. But if she doesn't get this deal through the House of Commons, I think it's very likely that she'll resign and someone else will step up and deliver an amended deal, no deal, or what else. But I think that the real litmus test is not on the vote of no confidence. It's on getting this deal through the Commons. And if it doesn't go through the Commons, I would put my money on Theresa May resigning.
James, I know you wanted to get in on that real quick. I could tell by your face.
No, I mean, look, I think if there is, if it's voted down, I think there is there is very little that suggests that that Parliament will go for a no-deal situation. It's highly unlikely that Parliament will allow that to happen. But I also think it's very unlikely that the European negotiators, that Michel Barnier is going to allow for a reopening of negotiations that have been conducted in a painstaking manner over 2 years. I think that the idea of going back to the drawing board and having a renegotiation is very, very unlikely.
Okay, and that'll be the final word. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sure we will continue to have this conversation. James Savage, Tom Brooks, and Drew Lickerman, thank you for watching as well. You can see the program again anytime if you go to our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Richelle, Carey, and the entire team here in Doha, bye for now.